He does go knight d7. Rook to b7. And now rook to c7 played. And he takes, pawn takes, and now rook c2 stops the pawn here, but knight f8 check. So very powerful move. King g8, and now rook d8, so that if rook takes pawn, there's knight e6 check and you lose the rook. Otherwise you are queening here. What an amazing game, an impeccable game by Praggnanandhaa. He is totally winning here. He's reached move number 40, and Robert Hovhannisyan played really well out of the opening, but then Pragg outwitted him totally in the middle game. And he stops the clock. Welcome everyone to the final round of the Stepan Avagian Memorial 2025. We have Grandmaster Praggnanandhaa coming in on your left, and the game has already started. He's taking on Robert Hovhannisyan. Robert Hovhannisyan, a very strong player from Armenia with an ELO of 2635. And Praggnanandhaa coming fresh from his performance at Superbet Chess Classic, which he won, and now playing the Stepan Avagian Memorial in order to push his lead in the FIDE circuit. He's currently leading it, and now in this tournament he's also leading it along with Arvind Chidambaram with 5.5 points out of 8. A very crucial final round. Pragg has the white pieces and he will be trying for the full point. He opens the game with 1 e4, and Robert responds back with the super solid e5. Pragg gets his knight out to f3, and now the knight comes to c6. We have bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board here. And knight f6. We have the Berlin defense. And let's see what Pragg goes for. He goes for d3, the anti-Berlin. And now the bishop comes out to c5. It's possible to do this because of take. Knight e5 is met with queen d4, a double attack here. Pawn to h3 by Pragg. And this is a new idea, which is what has made Robert start thinking. Knight to d4 played, a fantastic move, because if you take here, I simply win a piece with knight takes b5. So you have to do something about your bishop here. Praggnanandhaa takes on d4, and I think here you take back with the bishop, keeping it open. He pushes his pawn to c3. The bishop will go back to b6 now. Yes, bishop comes back to b6. And now Praggnanandhaa pins the knight on g5, on f6 with his bishop on g5. And he's planning to maybe castle short later on. If he can get f4 and pressure, would be interesting. c6 played. Now this pin is strong because the bishop cannot go back to e7. He goes bishop c4. Can we hit it with d5 is the question. Robert plays his pawn to h6. And I think you want to keep the pin on with bishop h4. You don't want g5. You don't want to take on f6. And g5, bishop g3 is something that you are okay to play with. Let's see what Pragg does here next. He pushes his pawn to d6 here, Robert. And maybe not the most direct way to play, but a completely fine way. Knight d2. Bringing the knight into the game. And you can see Pragg moving quickly, showing confidence here. Queen comes to e7. And the one thing about Robert is that he is very well prepared in general. He has great chess understanding. A4 by Praggnanandhaa, gaining space on the queen side. Wants to play B4 later. Pawn push forward to A5. Stopping the white pawn. And now queen comes up to E2. So very positional play here by both players. Maybe now you go bishop E6, offering a trade of bishops. Exactly. Bishop E6 here. And as you can see, against an experienced player, the setup that Praggnanandhaa has chosen has not borne any real fruits. But Rook T1, he took, look at this, he took 19 minutes for this move. And is it like if bishop takes bishop, Pragg doesn't want to take with the pawn. He wants to play knight takes and maybe then use D4, yeah, with this rook here. Castles by black. And Praggnanandhaa here also quickly castles it out. Goes rook Fe8. Robert and Pragg could be trying for this F4 break by moving his king away, but he goes queen F3, putting pressure here on F6. And now the bishop comes to D8. Oof, very interesting move by Robert. He might move the queen away and then put the bishop here, and it would then be defending his knight on F6. That's very interesting. Rook E1. Pragg defends E4, is planning for the D4 break. Bishop takes bishop. I guess you take back with the knight here. Yes, he takes with the knight. And maybe now just queen C7 feels right. Oh, queen E6, even better. Brings the queen out of the pin. And I think black is slowly and steadily trying to equalize here. But Pragg goes B3. And the idea is clear. Pragg wants D4 break. He wants his knight to be defended. He wants his knight to be here, which is beautifully positioned. And Hovhannisyan plays knight D7. How do you beat a player who is playing so solidly like Robert? It's not at all easy. Pragg takes on D8. You must take back with the E rook. Taking with the A rook weakens the A5 pawn. So rook E takes D8, and now time for D4. Yes, so Pragg has a small edge now in the center. He has some more space. He's pushed forward with D4, and Robert goes B5. And his hope is if Pragg takes, he can take back and then create a passed pawn on the A file. So pawn to D5 played. Very interesting move. Pawn moves forward and queen F6. Another nice move, because if you would have taken CD, then ED and then B5 would have been hanging. But queen F6 is such a nice move here, because if you take here, your knight is hanging. So Pragg goes knight A3. And he's ready for the queen trade here, but he's putting pressure on B5. Queen takes queen happens. Pawn takes by Pragg. And now pawn takes pawn. You can take on B5 here. He takes it. AB5. And this is getting interesting, because now pawn takes pawn. You can take rook takes D6. So he goes rook C8. Maybe not the best move here. Well, much better was perhaps to play knight B6 or pawn to A4, gaining counterplay there. But rook C8, Pragg takes with the rook. Point being that now he wants to play C4, D6 is weak, so you have to take on C3. He does take it. Rook takes C3 on the board. And now rook takes D6, attacking the pawn. Suddenly the position sharpens up. and Pragg perhaps is better suited. Now knight f8 better, but knight c5 played. He's trying to attack here on the pawn on b3 and creating play. Rook takes b3, but rook c6 pins the knight on c5. It's a very good move here. Will Praggnanandhaa find it? And it's actually a very interesting move. Finds it. What a beautiful move. And the point being that if rook takes b3 now here, then you can just go rook takes c5, rook takes a3 and rook b1 with the idea of b6, b7 and rook c8 wins. So rook c6, he goes rook to b8, and now this very nice move, knight b1, finds it. Another beautiful move by Praggnanandhaa. He wants him to take so that his knight is hanging, so rook c2 looks forced. He plays rook c2, but it's already almost lost here with rook d1. He gets his rook on the open file. Pragg is fully pressing in a big way. You can't take, by the way, here because of a fork. So he plays king h7, trying to come out of any checks. Pragg pushes b6, and this pawn combined with the two rooks is just deadly with this pin as well. All in all, it's just totally losing position for Robert Hovhannisyan. He goes f6. He's trying to kind of save his position here in some ways, but Pragg showing the futility of it by king g2. He's like, I don't have to do anything, Robert. You're just not able to move. King comes to g6, and I think you can already start thinking about rook d5 to attack here, but maybe there's knight d3 and there's check and you can come out of it. So you have to be slightly careful after king g2. Also king g3, there's knight e4, so knight a3 played, attacking the rook. Rook has to come to c3. He goes rook a2, and now a fantastic move, knight c4. Isn't the pawn hanging on b3? Yes, it is. But now comes knight takes pawn check, followed by knight d7, because the pawn is pinned on f6. Yes, he takes on e5. Pragg has 5 minutes 44 seconds. Robert Hovhannisyan has 5 minutes on the clock. Goes back king h7, and now knight d7 with the idea of b7, b8 is super strong. He does go knight d7. Rook to b7. And now rook to c7 played. And he takes, pawn takes, and now rook c2 stops the pawn here, but knight f8 check. It's a very powerful move. It's king g8. And now rook d8, so that if rook takes pawn, there's knight e6 check and you lose the rook. Otherwise, you are queening here. What an amazing game. An impeccable game by Praggnanandhaa. He is totally winning here. He's reached move number 40. And Robert Hovhannisyan played really well out of the opening. But then Pragg outwitted him totally in the middle game. And he stops the clock and resigns. Pragg wins. He moves to 6.5. And there he is looking at the game of Arvind. Because if Arvind loses or draws, Pragg is the champion. But it turns out that Arvind also won his game. And so Pragg and Arvind both ended with 6.5 points out of 9. Joint winners. But in the end, on tie breaks, it was Praggnanandhaa who had to settle for second position. And it was Arvind who became the champion. Nonetheless, a beautiful game by Pragg, just flawless from the opening, and once he was presented with a chance, he put no foot wrong, and that's why he's one of the best players in the world of